sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Aaron. Stay standing. I would like to invite Chaplain Tammy Alfredini from the U.S. Army Reserves, mental health chaplain from the Michael APGA Medical Center to our meeting.
Good morning. Let us pray. Eternal God, today we remember the lives we lost on September 11, 2001 in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania during the terrorist acts that shook our nation. We remember the first responders, police officers, firefighters, doctors, nurses, troops of the United States military, and countless volunteers throughout our nation, who many of them risked their own lives to rescue others. And God, we remember the survivors who are suffering from physical and mental wounds sustained from the horrific acts of terrorism. We remember the thousands of family members and friends who are grieving because of the profound loss. And so, God, today, as we honor the fallen, we pray for continued courage, comfort, hope, and peace for this nation and for each family affected by such cruel acts. God, may all of humanity commit themselves to the work of love and peace. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I would like to welcome Brigadier General Robert Degree, Deputy Commanding General of the 75th Innovation Command, U.S. Army Reserves, and actually had Colonel Greg Williams has been replaced by Chief Warrant Officer 5, Kevin Linnebaum, Command Chief Warrant Officer, 75th Innovation Command, U.S. Army Reserves. For the presentation of the wreath, also welcome to the stage Jasmine, who is a student veteran and U.S. Navy veteran. She's also our board leader this morning. Thank you, Jasmine.
Jimmy Neville Story lived in Katy. Michael E. Tinley, who lived in Dallas. Barbara Olson, born in Houston. Daniel Martin Caballero, born in Houston. Lieutenant Colonel Karen Wagner, raised in San Antonio. Lauren Katuzi Grandipolis and her unborn child, raised in Houston.
Thank you, Jasmine. We're here to honor these Texans who lost their lives on 9/11, as well as the many first responders, active duty military, civilians who lost their lives on 9/11. So I want to thank you for being here today. Please have a seat, and I will welcome to the stage Dr. Richard Walker, who is our Vice Chancellor, Vice President of Student Affairs and Enrollment Services, for some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. First of all, let me thank Selena and Sandra, the student leaders, and staff in the Veteran Services office here at the University of Houston for organizing today's event. You know, I have been in higher education now for 36 years, and I will always remember where I was on 9/11 in 2001. I was actually sitting in a staff meeting at the University of Miami, and someone came running in to tell us that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. And at the time, did not know what that really meant. So we continued with our staff meeting. A few minutes later, they came back in and said, a second plane has crashed the second time. We adjourned the staff meeting and immediately went down to the lounge in the student center, where all the students had started to gather and watch the television. For many of you, especially some of our students, you really don't remember September 11, 2001. Dr. Munson and our dean students were just talking that some of our freshmen were just being born about that time. So it is important for us as a university, as a nation, to remember what occurred on that day and the impact that it had on our country and those that were affected. And so today, we celebrate in remembrance that tragic occurrence, but we also celebrate what that means for the strength of our country. I want to share a poem that was written in remembrance of 9/11 by a young woman named Cindy Sargent, who at the time, in 2001, was a ninth grader. And she wrote, "Will we remember the way life was, the way it used to be? The way children frolicked about playing happy and carefree? Will we remember the way spring was, blooming wildly with flowers? The way we jumped and played in puddles, falling into rain showers? The way the summer sun beat down on our backs, sweat glistening on our skin? The way we retreated into the shade as our faces were cooled by the blowing wind? The way the full days grew increasingly cooler, leaves falling to the ground? The way the leaves changed their colors, becoming more and more brown? The way the winter snow fell lightly to the ground, leaving thick blankets of white lace. The way it looked so calm and peaceful, like a picture of heaven's grace. Will we remember the way life was before freedom was attacked? For on that fatal day, 9/11, there was a great impact. Will we remember what happened that day when so many lost their lives? The way life seemed it wouldn't go on, unable to survive. Will we remember those who perished, the innocent and the brave, the victims and the ones who aided and tried to help and save? Will we remember the tragedy when our country was assailed, the way our patriotism united us as one so together we prevailed? Will we remember all of this, everyone across our nation's land? Will we remember what our country represents in the words, united we stand, God bless America.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sandra Glass. She is a U.S. Navy veteran's wife. She's very proud of that. And she's also program coordinator for Veteran Services. And I'd like to mention when she comes on stage that Sandra has taken a lot of time and effort and has done a great job in planning this event. So thank you, Sandra, for that. She is going to introduce our group of panelists today. We're going to have a moderated session, and then we're going to allow you to stand. There's some microphones on this side that you can come and ask questions. Please feel free to ask questions. We'll keep it moving along. And then after the panelist session, we're going to have these fine young men and women who are seated in this row. They're going to come and raise their right hand and do their enlistment ceremony. So let me introduce Dr. Sandra Glass.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm going to be introducing our distinguished panelists, and I just ask that you would please hold your applause until the very end. Colonel Thomas Mitchell. As a colonel in the Texas State Guard, Mr. Thomas Mitchell serves as the Deputy Commander for the Army Component Command's Engineer Regiment. His responsibilities include providing leadership, guidance, and resources to a headquarters staff and 3 geographically separated battalions charged with developing and deploying professional and technical engineering personnel. This is to deliver infrastructure reconnaissance, facility condition assessment, and incident management capabilities across the state during contingency response operations. Mr. Mitchell previously served as a U.S. Air Force active duty civil engineering officer and retired as a lieutenant colonel after serving 20 years at military installations throughout the U.S., Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Colonel Mitchell presently serves as Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer for FM3IS Associates LLC, a San Antonio-based facilities management advisory assistance and technical consulting firm. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Architectural Studies, a Master of Arts degree in Management, and a Master of Military Operational Arts in Science. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher C. Tashany. Lieutenant Colonel Tashany is the Chief of Human Space Flight Support, Detachment 3, Johnson Space Center, Houston, Texas. Lieutenant Colonel Tashany was born in Kent, Washington. Following his commission in 1991, he attended undergraduate pilot training at Vance Air Force Base, Oklahoma. After earning his pilot wings in 1997 at Fort Rucker, Alabama, he began flying helicopters at Keflavik Naval Air Station, Iceland. Prior to his current assignment, Lieutenant Colonel Tashany served as the branch chief for personnel recovery in Europe at Ramstein Air Base, Germany, commanded the Air Force Survival School in Spokane, Washington, and was the command pilot for the Air Force Special Operations Command. His deployments include Operations Northern and Southern Watch, Atlas Response, and Enduring Freedom. Additionally, he held the title of Lead Agent for Air Force One and directly supported 7 POTUS events across Europe and Africa. Lieutenant Colonel Pashley received a Bachelor of Science degree in Psychology from Portland State University and a Master of Military Operations in Sciences at Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama. He is married and has 2 children. Lieutenant Colonel Jeff McKeel, retired. Mr. Jeff McKeel received his commission in the United States Marine Corps from the United States Military Academy at West Point through the Inter-Service Commissioning Program. 3 years later, he went on to receive his Wings of Gold as a naval aviator, an EA-6B private pilot. Mr. McKeel completed deployments in support of Operation Southern Watch in Saudi Arabia, Operation Northern Watch in Turkey, Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and the unit deployment program with Marine Tactical Electronic Warfare Squadron 3 in Japan. He was also the Marine Officer and Instructor for the NROTC unit, Houston Consortium, and the Fixed Wing Aviation Safety Officer and Aviation Safety Branch Head for the Marine Corps Safety Division in Washington, D.C. Lieutenant Colonel McKeel retired from the United States Marine Corps in 2016. He now serves as the Employee Safety and Service Manager for the Harris County Engineering Department. He holds a master's degree in Business Administration from Penn State University and a Bachelor of Science degree in American Politics from the United States Military Academy. And Chief Petty Officer James Boswell. Chief Petty Officer Boswell began his military career in 2001 at Navy Recruit Training Command, Great Lakes, Illinois, and received his initial training at Navy Submarine Base, New London, Connecticut, as an auxiliary machinist mate. His initial assignment was on board the USS Boise, a fast attack submarine based out of Norfolk, Virginia. He completed 2 deployments in support of operations in the Mediterranean Sea and Operation Iraqi Freedom. He served in Navy recruiting for Los Angeles until becoming a career recruiter. After selection as the Navy Chief Petty Officer, he transferred to Navy Recruiting District Minneapolis. He served as the Division Lead Chief Petty Officer for 12 stations and 1 military entrance processing center across 3 states. In 2016, he was selected as the command trainer for 200 sailors and civilians. Upon transfer to Navy Recruiting District Houston, Texas, Chief Petty Officer Boswell was assigned as a reserve officer recruiter and command fitness leader. Chief Petty Officer Boswell earned a bachelor's degree in business administration from the Post University. Please help me welcome all of our distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Glass, for the invitation to be here today. I want to start off with this. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The 9/11 tragedy is in fact a tragedy, the most significant that I've personally experienced in my lifetime. Although I did not lose any family members, I've lost comrade in arms as a result of what we needed to do after the event. But when you think about it, this is not the first time, or that was not the first time our nation had been attacked. Go back about 80 years plus or minus, we had a major attack on the state of Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. About as many people died. And of course, there were actions we needed to take after that. But if you look at your American history, you'll find out that we have had attacks against our nation's sovereignty ever since the Boston Massacre. And as you go through every single major conflict, you will find that somebody tried to do something to take us from who we are. We're a nation of freedom. We're a nation of rights. And even though we're human, which means we fall down, and we always fail short of what we could or should be doing, I found that every single one of these attacks, to include 9/11, did one thing that's in common. It galvanized us. It helped us to put aside our differences and focus on what makes us America. And as a result, there are individuals out there who have a problem with who we represent. I put on this uniform because I love this country. It didn't start off that way, to be completely candid with you. The Air Force was a way for me to get my undergraduate degree paid for. All I had to do was give them 4 years that I could put on a resume and then parlay that into some private sector opportunity being an architect. But I found something that surprised me, actually, because I'm first generation. The Air Force, and I found the other services, are families, where, again, we put aside our differences and how we came together, and we recognized those things that kept us bonded and kept us in common. And I absolutely loved my service. As a result of those 20 years on active duty, I found out about the Texas State Guard. Most of you probably haven't heard of it. I didn't until a good friend of mine, a family member from the Air Force, told me about this organization that is unique to the state of Texas. And once I got past him not saying National Guard, I started listening to what he had to say. And I said, the Texas State Guard is a state defense force, and our primary responsibility is protecting those who need help when it comes to some type of threat. In this case, it's natural. So we have our active duty brothers and sisters who take care of business when it comes to the man-made threats. And you have the state defense forces, not only in Texas, but in other states, that take care of the natural ones. I love what I do, but I've never forgotten about what I experienced when 9/11 hit. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was a movie, but it was real. But again, the call to duty was strong. We had more people who decided to wear the uniform, and we took it to those who would do things against us. We have to maintain our vigilance. Those threats continue to exist, whether they're man-made or natural. And what keeps us strong are the individuals who recognize that we are worth fighting for.
Colonel Mitchell, that was absolutely amazing. Who wants to keep my 5-minute time hack? Because I think I actually get 2 of your minutes because you didn't use them all. So I get 7.
My goodness, that's rare.
And Chaplain, before it's all said and done, would you please remind me of the number 135 before I sit down? Thank you. Today is a day of vigilance. Today is a day of memories. Today is a day of where was I and how we remember. I look around and see people in uniform. Chances are not everyone was in uniform on September the 11th, 2001. That's okay. You may not have been in, but you got here as soon as you could. Doesn't matter what uniform you wear, as the good colonel said, we are a family. The general, the chief, warrant, it didn't matter where you were on that day. It doesn't matter where you are now. But I'm going to leave you with a couple of lessons. If you spend most of your daily moments figuring out how to obtain things for yourself, if that is the majority of what you do in life, you're going about it the wrong way, and you're not being vigilant, and you're not making as much of a difference as you can. I threw a couple of pictures up just to sort of talk through, and in fact, I was in Northern Watch supporting Jeff at a time or two. I remember the prowlers coming and thinking, as a combat search and rescue guy, if he bails out, I have 4 guys I have to go after, and they don't stay together. It's really weird. When you jump out of an aircraft, you bail out, everybody goes in a different direction. They don't fly in formation. They land all over the place. So thanks. You're a nightmare. A hot nightmare, those prowler guys. And they jammed us trying to talk to the survivors, which wasn't ever very friendly. Slide, please. Okay, so I spent some of my time at NASA. I was chief of human spaceflight support, suited subject, big, tall, lanky guy. NASA wants to know how our astronauts will fare when they when they spend time in a capsule. So I spent a lot of time doing that. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express. I'm not actually an astronaut, but that's what I look like when I'm playing a suited subject for the Orion program, which is going to take us back to the moon. Slide. I might not have been a firefighter on 9/11. My baby brother is, and I got to the fire department as soon as I could, as soon as something fit. I'm a volunteer firefighter with Pasadena. That guy all the way on the left attempting to put that lake and that vehicle out is in fact me. Fire burning on water is a really hard thing to put out. But there's a connection here because shortly after 9/11, I went to New York right before one of my deployments. And I flew, there were not very many of us flying. But as a member of the United States Air Force, Combat Search and Rescue, guess what? We were right over the top of the city. And we were allowed to fly with only the police. It was the police, and it was us, and no one else. Walked into a pizza place to get a order a pizza pie, and a guy comes up and bumped me, and he says, "Hey, sir, you go get those boys over there for us. You give them what for?" And it was a family. He didn't know who I was. He wasn't in the military. And in his thick New York accent, he said, "You go give those boys hell for what they did to us." Amazing. Never met the guy in my life. Slide. Yep, there we are, family. So, active duty military, 27 and a half years. As of 3 weeks from now, I will hang up the uniform. I'm going to continue to do this because I'm making a bigger difference. And I don't spend every waking moment like, where's my next car and where's the next vacation and can I get a Rolex and can I get this and can I get that? You guys got to get your educations first. And after you get an education, figure out how to make a difference. This truly is the greatest nation on the earth, defined by the documents that have stood the testimony of time, written by some really smart guys that knew when they wrote those documents, they'd have to stand the test of time and how culture thinks and looks at one another. And they've done exactly that, and we've amended it. One of the beautiful processes about our defining documents. Slide. Baby brother there on the right, fighting the fires in California. So it runs in the family. That's a full-time job for him. Slide. That was when I was covering Jeff, believe it or not. That's Southern Watch. That's after we took a lot of Kuwait away from Saddam Hussein. We made those impregnable bunkers look like that. It's pretty good. Slide. Have you forgotten? Who knows the song? 6'6" guy, actually taller than me. I was like, no way, you're taller than me. That's Daryl Worley. And right after he left us in Kandahar, jumped on that plane and started writing the lyrics. So when he says that part about I've been there with the soldiers who've gone away to war, evidently he had a dog named Chaz. Everybody around I thought was really funny because he couldn't have kids or didn't have kids at the time. And he said, oh, we had a blue heeler and named him Chaz instead. Everybody snickered because that's my nickname, Chaz. Not funny. Slide. I want you to take a good hard look at this picture right here. Can you imagine having that guy in the back of your aircraft covering your 6? Everybody here okay with that? Step on board an aircraft and have a guy looking like that? There's one thing that I learned when I was in the Middle East. The longer the beards of the people that we were advising, the potentially more radical they were. He was an imam and was very vocal against the United States. I didn't have the authority to kick him off my aircraft. One 30-second story. Sure, we get engaged. Helicopters, airplanes, we always get engaged. My aircraft took fire. Guess who called it out? Not him, my interpreter. Saw the rounds coming up through the tail. We broke the formation. I cleared him to fire. He said, it's okay to shoot. I said, why, yes. I need you to make the heavy metal termites go back the other way because they're sending them our way. Let's do a little vis-a-vis, will you please? Didn't fire. Broke the aircraft back the other way. My left gunner didn't see anything. I broke back to the right. Right gun, please engage that target. It was a technical. Who here in the room knows what a technical is? Those nasty little trucks that they put heavy machine guns in the back of, and he was doing his best to not let us come home. 2 or 3 times of this, what seemed like an eternity, this guy refused to return fire. My left gunner jumped off his gun, went across the aircraft, put his elbow through his ear, knocked him out of his gun, off his chair, picked up his weapon, and returned fire. Ladies and gentlemen, the men before you, the perspectives that we will share with you, and I want to congratulate all of you for beginning a journey. 27 and a half years ago, I would not have imagined that I'd spent this much time. But you know what? It felt good because I was making a difference. Make a difference in what it is we have. Keep it, hold it, protect it, and we'll all be better for it.
135.
So I didn't look closely at the script to see that we were going to, in fact, play taps. because it is this day and Memorial Day that I am most reminded that I lost 135 brothers and sisters since 9/11. Combat search and rescue is extremely brutal. We would lose entire crews at once. Air advisors are extremely brutal. You have to sit with people like that in the same room. It's really tough. I stopped keeping count at 135 2 Memorial Days ago. I couldn't bear it. So for me, the number will be eternal. That's the price that those people paid, the ultimate sacrifice in making that difference. Thanks, guys.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you both for sharing your perspectives. Exceptional. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be up on the stage with everybody. Since it's a day of remembrance, I want to remember to say thank you. A couple thank yous to Sandra and the Veterans Office team for inviting us today. Again, this is a privilege to be up here to chat with you all this morning. The second thing is to say thank you to those who are in uniform. For those not in uniform, you have my absolute eternal respect, and I wish you all the best in everything you do, and thank you for your service. Thank you for choosing to serve the United States of America in uniform. And I want to say thank you to all of you. It's all of you, right, that are gonna take the oath here in just a minute. I want to say thank you to you all too. This is a tremendous step, and I'm sure you've heard that before. And at the risk of sounding unoriginal, you all are absolutely indebted from folks like me who say thank you for making the choice to go and serve the country. Thank you very much. And last, I have to say a thank you to all of those that I had the privilege of serving with, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. But I wanted to start by saying that when I graduated and went into and got my commission and started my Marine Corps career, if you remember the 1990s, the Soviet Union was no more. I started as a young 18-year-old at West Point. Desert Storm had just happened. I had classmates who served in Desert Storm. That was very much a time where things were looking very good for what the U.S. military could do and the way the world was. And then through the 90s, certain things happened throughout the world. Black Hawk Down, the attack on the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, the attack on the USS Cole, the Navy ship in 2000. So it was a very, very complex time in the world where a lot of things were coming together. I had finished flight school in 1999, went to my first operational organization in 2000, did a deployment to Saudi Arabia to patrol the southern no-fly zone over southern Iraq. And things had a very mechanical feel. I knew I was going to deploy next to Turkey, and after that I was going to deploy to Japan. I was going to do something after that. I was going to continue flying down the road and see where my career went. Things were feeling like it was on a certain path. And then September 11th happened, and things changed. The gravity of that day really, besides seeing the TV, the video, the pictures, everything that happened, the gravity of it was what was the thing I'll remember most, is that what happened and everything that you saw and everything that you tried to process was almost impossible. It was almost impossible to figure out that somebody had done this, somebody had tried to do this against our country, and that they had done it, and now there were things that you saw almost nightly. And the one thing that gets to me the most are the people that put pictures up of their loved ones saying, if you see my son or see my daughter or see my dad or see my mom or see my cousin or my friend, can you please call this number because they're missing and I can't find them. You understood the gravity of it, and it was massive. And if at all you didn't wonder about what it was to serve and be called to service at any time in your life, that was it. That was it right there. The reason I wanted to come back to saying thank you was that after I did my first tour in flying in 2003, I came back to Houston. I got selected to teach ROTC at Prairie View A&M and Rice. And when I started in 2003, I knew that the senior class that graduated my last year on that tour in 2006 was a class that decided to join the ROTC unit after September 11th. Those students started their career knowing what the world was like and what it had in store for them and what they were going to do. Afghanistan was in full force. Iraqi freedom was in full force. A number of other things around the world were happening, but those students chose to come and serve, and those students were of particular inspiration to me because of their knowledge of what the world held for them as they went out. So all along the line, people have come up to me and said, thank you for your service. There was an American Airlines counter attendant in 2009 at LAX who gave me a hug. There was a man here in Houston who came up to me at the gas pump and shook my hand and said, thank you for your service. And there are a number of other folks, and it was wonderful, and it was a nice feeling. But I really have to say that it has been an honor and a privilege serving, and I see all of you out here who are still serving, and I say thank you to all of you, and knowing on this day of remembrance that we remember everybody that was lost on September 11th, I remember all of you as well who are going to go out there and continue to keep our nation safe. So thank you for letting me have the chance to stand among you. The honor's all on my side of the stage. Thank you.
Good morning. To the distinguished guests, as well as the future sailors out in the audience and the people that are currently serving, thank you. I want to also thank the first responders as well as in the back. 9/11 was a very interesting time. The world's problems spilled onto American soil at that point. And one thing America does is we maintain freedom and democracy around the world. That's what we do. So I just want to take you back a little bit to help you understand the internal part of everything that goes on in every sailor. See, I'm an enlisted sailor, and I'm from Beaumont, Texas. And, one thing growing up I've always had was a sense of patriotism. And every diehard Texan in here knows what I'm talking about when I say patriotism. I got instilled a lot of moral character as well. So when basic training happened in 2001, I was in boot camp when this happened. And we received word that 2 planes hit the World Trade Center. You got to know, there's over 90 countries in this World Trade Center. Our allies died. Our citizens died. The people who make the world one passed away that day. So in order for you to have the strength, you have to know the past in order to have the courage to fight for the future. So I tell each one future sailor in here, there's about 20-something of you in here, as well as the junior sailors, I challenge you to look at your history. I challenge you to remember 9/11, and I challenge you to look at a couple of things. One, why are you going to serve this country? Because the young men here and the people in this room right here have protected us so long. Now it's time to pass that baton. 2, where are you going to head when you serve this great nation? Where are you going to go? How far are you going to be? What are you going to do? Live a sense of purpose while serving this great nation. Because at the end of the day, we bear the cloth of our forefathers, and now we have to fight for the future now. So, with that said, the last thing I'll give you as far as advice for the future sailors in this room, as well as the students, you have to know your past. You have to remember the sacrifices of your forefathers and the people around you in order to know where we're going to go. I keep saying that over and over again throughout this one presentation right here is you have to know. You have to remember the sacrifices those have made so we can be here to this day. You have to remember the sacrifices of the pilot over here so we can be here this day. You have to remember the sacrifices of the firefighters, the police officers who lost their lives in order for us to be here today. So while America maintains freedom and democracy around the world, while we continue to move forward, you got to know it's going to take patriotism. It's going to take the love of your country. It's going to take the love of your fellow man in order for us to continue to be the greatest nation on this planet. Again, I thank you, and I appreciate everyone in this room, and I appreciate all the first responders, and I appreciate all the men and women who've lost their lives. And I do want to say, I love this country and I love America. That's all I have.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to moderate for the questions. We do have a microphone up here, so if anyone has a question, please come forward. In the meantime, I'd like to say, it's interesting that Dr. Walker had this about, he remembers that day. And I remember that day also, because I'm sure many of us do. I was setting up some of the pictures this morning, and as I looked at the pictures, I thought, man, I remember that. I remember seeing that. And I remember very vividly that day. When the first plane hit, I thought, man, what kind of pilot is that? He couldn't land that plane in the water. He had to hit a building. And then when the second one hit, I knew right away something was going on. And, I want to ask you guys, again, if anybody has questions, there's a microphone right here. If not, hey, I have a list of questions we can go through for a couple of minutes. But I just want to ask you guys, we can start with Chief Boswell down there. Do you remember that day? I know you each touched on that day. But do you remember exactly kind of what your thoughts were and how you responded? Not only yourself, but maybe the group of people you were around, individuals, co-workers. How did the country respond that day? Do you recall?
Absolutely.
That's a good question, actually. You were listed in 2001. Was it right after 9/11? Or?
I was in boot camp. It was actually the day, what happened was I was graduating that week. And I was sitting in boot camp. And I didn't know where I was going. I was 18 years old. I'm an enlisted sailor, so we didn't have any exposure to the military. And the interesting part about it was we were on the grinder. That's the area where we actually form up. And they notified us that some planes hit the World Trade Center. And a couple of sailors just fell out crying, and a couple of people stopped. And we realized that, oh, crap, we're about to go to war. And honestly, I never seen in my life 90 people band together and go, let's go do this. Let's go out there and fight. Within a year of being in the service, I was underwater firing missiles at a target. I didn't know where it was going. At that moment, I realized that we have to keep that fight over there. We have to maintain that freedom and democracy around the world. And I say that because how I felt, I felt a sense of courage. I was like, yes, this is why I'm serving. So that's how I felt. I felt a sense of patriotism. That's how I felt that day. And the people around me and these diehard Americans, I'm telling you, America came together that day.
We'll jump on to this.
Absolutely. I referenced that I think at one point in time I was actually providing the top cover for you while you were out hacking the Mish. One of the 135 people that I mentioned was sitting next to me. We were debriefing the mission that day. I was in Incirlik, or Diyarbakir, Turkey, forward area, covering down on the Northern Watch, which was, for those of you who don't realize, we kept Saddam between two lines, and when he strayed north, we took his toys away and his people away from him. The mission was over. It didn't go that well. I was debriefing some pararescuemen about how unhappy I was as flight lead for the mission, and my gunner comes in, Dino Thanos. He says, hey, sir, you need to turn on TV. TV comes up exactly as you thought. The pilots in the room are like, okay, who's the idiot? Clear blue sky, burning building, and they said the plane ran into it. As we watched the second plane hit live, John Stein, Lieutenant Colonel 1H, looked at me and said, Chaz, I think you should go get everyone in this room together. We're going to war. So, of course, like many of us, that day definitely went around twice. I'm pretty sure there was 48 hours in that day because it was by far the longest day of my life. We didn't know when the attacks were going to end. We didn't know if there were installations, military installations around the world where the attacks would also. So we were obviously tightened everything up. The Turks came and protected us, provided us additional guard. And at the end of the day, at about 4 the next day, Colonel Stein said, hey guys and gals, let's gather around, grab a knee, pray if you want, pause or reflect if you say. His words were, let us pray for the 2,977 fellow Americans that we have lost and those of our brothers and sisters that we will lose fighting this war. And he was the first one I lost. A bit of irony there. So I definitely remember that day, and I carry his name in my heart every day of my life.
Yeah, I thought it was a joke. I really thought it was some CGI movie. And when I saw the second plane hit, that's when it hit me. Oh, this is about as real as it gets. Chief Boswell mentioned something, purpose. It was at that moment that I realized that everything that I had an opportunity to do up until that point in time had prepared me for fulfilling this purpose. But it wasn't just me, though. Anybody who wears the uniform or has worn a uniform recognizes this is what we are called to do, to protect and defend against all enemies, foreign in this case, and domestic if necessary. This is what separates us from everyone else. This is literally why the U.S. military is still the most highly respected institution in this nation. Because we put our lives on the line, and some of us sacrifice our lives for people we don't even know. But we're here to protect and defend. So, I built air power. I didn't fly it, so hands off to those who did. But they have to land sooner or later. So, what was interesting is we had been preparing for something like this for a while. Force protection had always been an issue because of what Colonel McKeel said about, Khobar towers and so forth and so on. The threats were real. So we had plans in place whereby if we received the resources, we could put force protection out there that may not stop everything, but it might slow down and protect some people. It was a tragedy, but the windfall in terms of funding and support that we received to build these reinforcements, to secure these facilities, to harden these shelters, was everything we had asked for and then some. And there was another part of it too that I remembered. Unfortunately, it takes tragedy before you reach triumph. The firefighters that we've been talking about, the police officers, I actually read the 9/11 report. And even though we had some brave actions committed by many people during that time, there were some mistakes that we made too. Mostly intercommunications and operability. We couldn't even communicate with one another. Folks didn't even know that the second tower was about to come down. We couldn't reach them. So thankfully, our national government recognized that this is something we need to improve upon. And because of the wildland firefighters in California who had learned to bring different teams together from different jurisdictions and work as one single scalable organizations, we took those lessons learned and we eventually released the National Incident Management System, whereby now there is standardized communications and interoperability with all response agencies, regardless of who they are. That's why when Harvey occurred, when Katrina occurred, the loss of life was not as severe as it could have been because we learned from those lessons. Absolutely.
Colonel Hill, I got a question. Do you remember or the days you followed?
Sure. I do, and I wanted to, I guess, explain it. There was some very stark contrast, and I don't mean to minimize what happened on September 11th, but I will say this when I explain contrast. When that day, we as a squad, my squadron had basically shut down flight operations for what we called Semper Fit training, which was tobacco cessation, healthy eating. It was a day of, I don't know how you want to describe it, just personal fitness day. So we were in a community center, and there was a TV on in the break area, and everybody kept trickling out of our classes. And this is something annual training. We required annual training, and I was in charge of it. And so I had worked to convince a squadron commander of airplanes that we shouldn't fly on one day and do all this training because we needed to do it. Otherwise, we couldn't deploy. Is interesting and is kind of strange as that sounds, is that we had to do it. So during the middle of our health and fitness training, we all started watching the TV, and it was almost just an unspoken bond between 200 Marines to say, okay, this is what we got, this is what we're trained for, this is what we're going to do. So from what seemed to be sort of what we considered very rudimentary training and some life skills to now we're going to go and we're going to face head on what this was that came to us in such an obscene way. It was a very stark contrast, but one that quickly brought us around to understanding what it was, what our mission was, and what we had to do. And from then on out, Marines were absolutely energetic for what they were going to do. And so while all that was going on, if I get this wrong, I apologize, but I want to say a few days after September 11th, we were at the squadron preparing to deploy anyway. We were going overseas to Turkey, and so we were readying ourselves to do that. I came out, it was late at night, and if I remember right, there was a day where they asked everybody to light a candle and put it in their window. And I pulled into our neighborhood. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and I'll be darned if every house in the neighborhood didn't have a candle in the window. We were getting ready to go overseas, do a combat mission, and go and face what the world had in store for us. But people around all in our neighborhood had lit candles, and it was an absolutely, I don't know how you describe it. It was just a sight where you said, this is where we are now. This is the United States of America. I'm proud to be in the uniform, and I'm proud to serve these people, and I hope I do right by them.
Thank you. Quick question.
parents and our teachers and like the administrative staff at our school, just so that way we kind of had an understanding of what it was like for everybody, before us. And, we were listening to the phone calls of the people, on the flight, calling their parents, and we were trying to really just grasp, how major the incident was, even though like we weren't, there to be alive or know what happened or anything. So.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you for sharing that. I did want to say that I had the the honor or the duty, I guess if you want to call it. I did a tour at the Pentagon later on in my career, and I would encourage everybody, go take your families, go visit the September 11th memorial. I went up just a few months ago for my wife's aunt's 90th birthday in New Jersey, and I have young children, but we took them to the World Trade Center site. And then at the Pentagon, I hosted a number of folks who wanted to see around the Pentagon, but I always took them to the American Airlines Memorial at the Pentagon. Go visit those sites. Go, even if you weren't alive or very young, go visit. Go take a look. Go see the names on the plaques. It's akin to what I would have guessed to go and visiting the Normandy Cemetery in France. Go see it, and go see it as often as you can. It's a humbling reminder to what happened that day. And it's very much a place of reverence. And I saw people from all around the world speaking different languages there and showing their respect to what happened. Same at the Pentagon, at the memorial there. So if you have the chance, and as soon as you can, go visit those sites.
That's true. There is definitely a brotherhood. We certainly pick on each other amongst the branches. Please keep the tradition going. But other than that, let's get you guys up here and let's move forward. Next, I'd like to invite on Dr. Munson for the closing ceremony.
Good morning, all. In closing, I want to share a poem. It's called Recessional. It was written by Rudyard Kipling in 1897, but I think it has special meaning today. And there's a phrase you're going to hear repeated over and over in here. It's called "lest we forget." And you've probably heard that phrase before. I heard it many times, didn't know really where it was from until I did the research on this poem. But I want to share this poem with you. God of our fathers, known of old, Lord of our far-flung battle line, beneath whose awful hand we hold dominion over palm and pine. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. The tumult and the shouting dies, the captains and the kings depart. Still stands thine ancient sacrifice, a humble and contrite heart. Lord of our hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. Far called, our navies melt away, on dune and headland sinks the fire, though all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nivea and Tyre. Judge of the nations, spare us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. If, drunk with sight of power, we lose, while tongues that have not thee in awe, such boastings as Gentiles use, or lesser breeds without the law. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. For heathen heart that puts her trust in reeking tube and iron shard, all valiant dust that builds on dust, and guarding calls not thee to guard. For frantic boast and foolish word, thy mercy on thy people, Lord. So this poem, Recessional, was written for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. That was a celebration of her 60th year of reign. This poem is well known for the biblical phrase, lest we forget, repeated throughout the poem, which has quickly become a mainstay of memorials and headstones. Kipling was troubled by this view of the world as a place of very fragile standing, and it is this view that made the poem powerful in 1897, and it stands to reflect the view that is very similar to where we are today. As we close our remembrance today, the phrase, lest we forget, reminds us that it is fitting that every year on September 11, Americans join together to honor the memory of the more than 3,000 people who died that day. Further, today we recall what we learned about ourselves on September 11, 2001. We recall how we acted that day. We remember once again how ordinary human beings chose duty in the face of death, as many responders continued to help people even as the buildings were collapsing around them. We saw ordinary people choose self-sacrifice for the good of strangers as the passengers on Flight 93 over Pennsylvania refused to allow the hijackers to succeed. And we remember the brave members of the U.S. Armed Forces who have sacrificed to protect our country since that tragic day. Lest we forget. So in closing, I want to thank you, members of the panel and the speakers that are here today. Thank you to Selena Dugas, Sandra Glass, and Jason Williams for organizing this event. And also congratulations to the newest members of the U.S. Navy. So in closing, we thank you. Join us for the reception in the lobby, please.